I guess we can start with the United States taking ownership of Gaza
Yeah.
and developing it into some kind of a resort place. It took everybody by surprise, including myself. What he was saying was so utterly stupid that he can't possibly mean what he's saying, that there's got to be something else going on.
All these European governments are collapsing because they're cutting social spending. They're cutting infrastructure spending. They're going to spend more money on a losing war.
Well, did you know that the Rothschilds still control the Russian central bank? And I said, no, they don't. Well, but they're the controlling shareholder. I said, it doesn't matter. You know, what matters is who has the monopoly on breaking legs and kidnapping your kids.
The FBI was the center of sexual blackmail of congressmen for years. That was Hoover's great calling card. He knew who was doing what to whom, and they still do that. They still have that as an element of control. The Epstein list is an example.
Take the first step towards online privacy. Get NordVPN.
When tyranny becomes law, rebellion becomes a duty. So said Thomas Jefferson. Go to bit.ly/lawful tax protest or bit.ly/make war history and find out why it is a criminal offence to pay central government or local government taxes in the UK.
Hi, Harley. Hi, Alex. Thank you so much for joining me once again. I'm going to have the links to where people can find you and your work. Naked Hedgie on X, and Harley, you're also on X, LaRouche Organization. Everything in the description below. And this is it's become, I quite like this, once a month conversation between the three of us, looking at what's happening in Europe and the US and the world, macroeconomics.
You can keep up with Alex Krainer's extraordinary analysis and writing at his Substack, and also make money using his trend-following strategy. To find out more, go to bit.ly/crypto-rich-alex-k, bit.ly/crypto-rich-alex-k. Keep up with Harley Schlanger's insightful analysis on macro politics at larouche.org. Link in the description below.
Welcome. Anything
Good
you
to see
want to be here? Yeah, thank you, Harley.
Thank you for having us, Rich.
Always,
Good to join you again.
Always welcome. Always welcome. We're recording this on Friday, the 7th of February, at just after 7 p.m. UK time. And Alex, take it away. What is going on? There is too much going on. I can't keep.
There is what's something been in the news that I missed? Well, okay, so I guess we can start with the whole Gaza, United States taking ownership of Gaza and developing it into some kind of a resort place, which is the Oreshnik missile that Trump launched yesterday. No, on the 5th. Today's the 7th. 2 days ago, in the second press conference he held with Benjamin Netanyahu, and it took everybody by surprise, including myself. And I see that the explanations, the speculation is all over the place. So, why not go there? I had my own take, because I thought that what he was saying was so utterly stupid that he can't possibly mean what he's saying, that there's got to be something else going on. And I kind of, okay, so first of all, that's not the United States. You can't just take ownership of a place that's 6,000 miles away from your shores.
They did that with Syria, a third of Syria.
Well, okay, but they occupied it militarily, or at least they set up these military bases and outposts where they could control the flow of oil in the region. Okay, but it's a different thing if you're talking about developing a place, turning it into this Riviera with hotels and golf courses and everything. It has to be, you have to have a legal, it has to be legally clean. There's no, who would recognize the legality of this? If it's not recognized as legal, it's worthless. You can't sell it to anybody. What's the point? Who would invest money into something that's contested? It's contested in a region that's fiercely hostile to the empire. So, and who's gonna clean it up? Who's gonna displace the 1.7, 1.8 million Palestinians who are there? Who's gonna do it, and how? Israelis can't do it. How are the Americans going to do it? So anyway, I thought, how can this even be? How is it even possible that I'm hearing this? And I thought that, the only way such a thought can even be contrived is maybe if, Trump and his people sat around, brainstormed, and, they said, like, the American thing, hey, let's think outside of the box. And somebody said, like, hey, boss, what about if we just take ownership of that place? And, you're a real estate developer, and we could justify it as a real estate acquisition of some sort. And, East Mediterranean, strategically important zone, beautiful place. It has a gas field offshore, which is not very large, but it is estimated at between $4 and $5 billion. So, the place has got potential. We can think about that. But if it's still stupid. Okay, so I can envision somebody making an effort to think outside of the box and coming up with this idea, but it's still stupid. And so then I thought maybe this was a chess move by Trump. And if you think of it as a chess move, like a geopolitical chess move, it does kind of make sense because it throws a massive curveball to the Israelis, to Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yes.
Because now, okay, so he has these fanatical war hawks in his government and these settlers who are dying to go back to Gaza to clean it. They're claiming it. They want to develop it. They want to build settlements there. And I think that as soon as Hamas releases the last hostage, that's exactly what they're going to want to do. Well, now if Trump is claiming Gaza, then how are these fanatical war hawks going to persuade the rest of Israeli society, the IDF, to go there to fight and die and be maimed, to liberate a place when the United States is claiming it? So, now you're potentially causing discord in the Israeli society and in their political leadership. Because what's the point now? The land that God promised us is now being claimed by Donald Trump, some goy from the United States. It's now a problem, it's no longer taken for granted that this land belongs to them. So maybe he's just thrown completely a spanner into the Israeli war machine. And he's also made things extremely delicate for Netanyahu, whose situation is already delicate as it is, because now some people to his right are going to say that he sold out. And so in those terms, I think maybe the whole thing does make some kind of a sense. But in any other way, it doesn't, because even, if we go back 100 years, a little bit more, the British Empire was extremely keen on controlling the Middle East. And the thinking around the round table, the Milner's kindergarten, was that if the British Empire was to remain a maritime empire, they needed to seed that region with a fiercely patriotic race. That was practically the quote from the Manchester Guardian from 1915. Okay, by an alumnus of the Round Table of Milner's kindergarten. So these were the how do you call it, the ideologues and strategists of the British Empire. But they didn't dream about just owning the place and going there and putting some British army outposts. They went through this whole extremely elaborate agenda, this project, to create Israel and to bring Jews to Israel, this fiercely patriotic race. And it took them a long time. So this quote that I told you was from 1915. It was in 1917 that Arthur Balfour wrote a letter to Lord Walter Rothschild saying that, oh yeah, we're in favor of giving a chunk of historical Palestine to create a homeland for the Jews. Another thing to know about that episode was that Lord Walter Balfour was the father of Nathan Balfour. Sorry, Lord Walter Rothschild was the father of Nathan Rothschild. And Nathan Rothschild was best friends with Arthur Balfour. And he practically lived at the Foreign Office. They were huddled there together day in, day out for weeks on end. And so, they together, the two of them put together a letter that was then issued to Nathan's father, and that was the legal basis for creating Israel, which is mental, but that's what happened. And then it was only after World War II that they managed to persuade large numbers of Jews from Central Eastern Europe to go to Palestine and to create a new country. It was a very, very elaborate scheme.
It was very elaborate.
And I think that they didn't do it because that was the easiest, the simplest way to do it. Normally empires will colonize, they'll create a military base there, right? But they didn't do that. Why? Because it's extremely complicated there. And you would be under attack. You'd be under attacks constantly. There's the religious, sectarian, tribal power equations there are constantly shifting. They're extremely complicated. You can't just go there and hope to hold the place down and to enjoy it in peace with what? A bunch of bartenders and receptionists and golf course attendants?
Shopkeepers, like Napoleon said. Yeah, Alex, for interrupting you, because I want to come in with Harley, right? But what you're talking about, the British way of empire is through proxies. That's how come this small island nation was able to rule over populous countries like South Africa and India so well, and they're still doing it through proxies. Harley, what's your take on this? And I'm just going to plug my power lead in.
I'll just say one slight difference from Alex. I think your overall picture was absolutely right. But I think the problem they had is that had it not been for the Holocaust, they wouldn't have been able to move the Jews into Palestine. And I know this from my own family, from Eastern European Jews. Given the choice between going to Haifa or Tel Aviv or New York and Miami Beach, they came to the United States. And when the Jews were liberated from the concentration camps, they weren't really liberated. They were moved into secondary camps. And they had to get permission from the British to move into Palestine. So they had a captive nation, in a sense, to create this. And that's, I think you're absolutely right in terms of the British Empire seeing this as a way of controlling a strategic choke point for maritime affairs with the Mediterranean, the Red Sea, the opening to the Indian Ocean, and so on, and also the land routes from Asia, Europe, into Africa. Now, on Trump, I think you're absolutely right, Alex. And I'll give you what I know about it. There was a very interesting letter drafted by Turki Al-Faisal, the director of Saudi intelligence. And it's headlined, "Mr. Trump, it's time for America to recognize Palestine." And he goes through the arguments for why you can't do what Trump is saying. But he does it in a very polite way. And the Saudis are very instrumental in Trump's thinking, because this goes to the Abraham Accords, it goes to his sense of a legacy. And by the way, do you think the United States is going to pay to build the Riviera in Gaza? No, they want the Saudis to do it. So Trump is very keen on what the Saudis will say and do. And this letter from Turki Al-Faisal just said that you can't treat Palestinians like a band of illegal immigrants to be deported to other lands. So that was a very pointed comment to Trump, given the immigration question going on in the United States. But then what I think is most crucial is Trump has a Netanyahu problem. Netanyahu is clearly, on the one hand, loved and hated in Israel right now. Most Israelis know that Netanyahu had something to do with the October 7th failure. And that there's going to be accountability for that at some point. But in the meantime, because of the decimation of Hezbollah, the attacks on Hamas, on Syria, and so on, he has a slight jump in popularity, which won't last very long. Because what we saw with the release of the hostages is that Hamas is still in control of the population of Gaza. So Hamas has not been obliterated by any means. Now, Trump is wise enough, I think, even though sometimes he just seems like he's speaking from the top of his head, he's wise enough to know that if you send American troops to clean up Gaza, you're going to have people coming back in body bags. That's the last thing he wants.
Yeah.
And so I think what you're saying is absolutely right. He's got Netanyahu boxed in. And I was looking at some editorials in Haaretz, the popular Israeli paper today, and what are they saying? Netanyahu did not want to go ahead with phase 2 of the ceasefire and hostage release. He was intending to use some kind of false flag or something as an excuse not to do it. Now that Trump has said, okay, we're taking over, this is going to be neat and clean, and you're going to be able to step back, Netanyahu's trapped. And on the one hand, the media was saying, look at his body language, how excited he was by what Trump said. I saw something different. It looked to me like he was completely stunned and didn't know what to do. And that's what's being said in much of the Israeli press. Now, that comes to the question then of what do you do? Now, there is an element of Trump's proposal which has been worked on for a while, and it was Jared Kushner who first proposed it as a real estate deal. And then you have, don't forget, Sheldon and Miriam Adelson, the casino couple that had casinos in Vegas and Singapore. They bet on Trump getting reelected, but bet on, I don't know, $100 million on it. So you could see that Trump might think it's a clever idea to bring in casinos, golf courses, luxury real estate, turn it into a new Riviera. But on the other hand, that's a 10 to 15 year minimal project to clear away the rubble. And in the meantime, what do you do with the population? And given that the Arab countries are now making it very clear that they're not going to go along with it, Trump has a way out. He can say, well, this was my proposal. If it's not going to work, we can do something, but we've got to make sure that Netanyahu's not going in and committing genocide. Now, it comes to the second point in the strategic picture, which is Ukraine. And what we've been seeing there is a kind of a mix with Trump on the one hand saying, well, if Putin's not going to go for peace, we'll have to put pressure on him. On the other hand, Kellogg, who's the envoy, is basically saying that by April, there's going to be a peace conference. And it's going to include most of what Putin wants, not all of it, but no NATO membership for Ukraine, Russia keeps the annexed lands, and so on. So I think this is where Trump is, he's got these two hot coals he's trying to balance, to walk over. And he's not getting a lot of help from Europe because the Europeans are absolutely insane. If you talk about the Israelis being crazy, just last 10 days ago, they had another one of these Ramstein air bases, the last one for the Biden administration. And the Europeans were saying, we're going to spend 5% GDP on defense. All these European governments are collapsing because they're cutting social spending. They're cutting infrastructure spending. They're going to spend more money on a losing war. And then you have Zelensky calling for nuclear weapons for Ukraine. So Trump has come up against a very profound strategic crisis. And I think it's very interesting. People may have missed this, but I think it was on January 30th, Marco Rubio, who would have ever expected Rubio to be the sensible person in the administration? He did an interview with Megyn Kelly, and what did he say? The unipolar era is over. It was an anomaly. We're now in a multipolar world. Now, then he said that means we're in competition with other great powers, which sort of fits into the British geopolitical idea. But this idea that the United States can no longer dictate to the world, the fact that Rubio said that, to me was quite interesting. And that's what Tulsi Gabbard's been saying. So you may have emerging around Trump some people who are less utopian than the Biden crowd and others. Now, do they know what to do? Do they have solutions? No, I don't think so. I think it's so crucial that Trump get meetings with Putin and Xi Jinping as soon as possible so they can tell him what the real situation is. Because US intelligence has been corrupted by ideology. Ideology, not intelligence. And ideology is broken down in the present situation. So I think I was very excited to hear your analysis, Alex, because it's exactly what I was working on in my article today.
Right,
Oh, excellent.
I'd like to add something to the mix. And I think, Harley, when you were saying ideology, I think you meant idiocy, just to correct you there, right?
Well, yeah, the ideology of geopolitics is a form of idiocy.
Completely. Now,
Okay, so
Alice, I'd like to come in.
No, I'm sorry. You
I'd
can't.
like to come in, right? But first, I just want to say, you guys just give really, really great analysis. And anybody who's watching, you want to, I go recommend you check out Harley's work and Alex's work, and I'll have the links in the description below. And of course, subscribe, comment, like, all that business, right? Okay, so here goes with me. So I've been trying to pass this the way that I can, right? And one of the things that I consider to be so for Trump is his anti-war ethos. He really doesn't want people dying in war. Now, I don't think he's a pacifist, but I remember an interview he gave on CNN, and the CNN anchor was saying to him, well, who do you want to win, Ukrainians or Russians? And he was saying, I want people to stop dying. He didn't say, I want Ukrainians to stop dying. He didn't say, I want Russians to stop dying. I want people to stop dying. I want the dying to stop. And she kept asking, well, who do you want to win, Ukraine or Russia? He wasn't getting it right. No, he wants the killing to stop. Then there was his appearance on the WEF Davos. And the way that he talked about the men that are being slain on the Ukrainian steppes, it's just the way that I don't recall Corbyn or Galloway speaking that way. It was very, very human. And he brought it up several times. We had beautiful men who were just dying needlessly, like authentic, like from the heart. And then one of the things I've suggested to my cousins is, given the evidence that there is for his pro-Zionism, he may be doing Zionism by means other than war, promoting that enterprise, that project by means other than war. So then I'm trying to pass, well, what is this? Because I was surprised by it. Okay, everybody else was, what? And then, of course, I read what Ian Carroll, who's anti-Zionist journalist, wrote about it, and I listened to what Galloway said about it, and of course, others and everything, right? On the one hand, this is just insane. How there's the practicalities, removing the people, whichever force is there, they're going to get attacked, whether it's the US or, UN or a mix of Arab soldiers or whatever, Arab military, they're going to get
attacked. Rich, don't forget, when they're talking about, they're saying they'll move out at least 500,000. With 2.5 million people there, that still leaves a whole lot of Palestinians.
Yeah, and who's going to take
no solution?
Who's going to take them? Nobody wants them because it would disrupt their own regimes. You have all these people coming in. So then on the one hand, okay, I can see, okay, that some people are saying that it's part of the Greater Israel project. He's empowering Netanyahu and everything, and from the river to the sea, it'll all be Zion or whatever, right? But on the other hand, where it doesn't fit, and there's a couple of things that you guys haven't mentioned, he's releasing the JFK, he said he's going to release the JFK files, hopefully unredacted. He's going to release, there's movements afoot to release the Epstein list. That's going to, what I think that's going to show is the role of Mossad and the British in the murder of JFK, and then also how Epstein was a Mossad operation in service of British Empire. So, and then the other things going on where gold, physical gold, is being drained from the LBMA and brought over to the US, completely undermining one of the biggest income sources for the UK, for the City of London, for Empire. She's going to sell you 1 million certificates on 1 kilo of gold. You'll never be able to claim it. Here's some cash. Oh, we're just printing another 1 million, right? So it doesn't fit. That if he's pro-Zionist, then why is he going to undermine the Zionists through these actions? Why is he doing that? And is it that it's some sort of clever chess plays, some feint? Because the other thing about Trump is he talks a big, big game, and then he negotiates down. And then he throws curveballs at people. And that was evident in his first campaign, the way that he campaigned. How do you deal with that? So that's my take on it.
Well, if I can jump in there on one thing, I think you have to look at the use of Elon Musk as the wrecking ball. And one of the things that's most interesting is Musk going after the Agency for International Development, AID. That's the color revolution operation.
Yeah.
And in the hands of Samantha Power, that's exactly what it was aiming at in Belarusia, in Georgia, in Kazakhstan. It's the element they have to deploy against the BRICS. Now, the one thing that I think doesn't quite fit in this assessment when we're talking about Trump is he hasn't figured out how to deal with the BRICS yet. And I think this is part of the intelligence failure, or we should say the intelligence warfare, to convince Trump that the BRICS are out to destroy the dollar and destroy the United States economy. And I think this is where Trump needs some help, because the extent to which he's moving with this idea of tariffs against anyone who's out to destroy the dollar, aren't people even listening to what Lavrov is saying, to what Putin is saying? Putin's saying this is not against the dollar. And I think there's a need for a full intelligence shakeup in the United States. And that's something I think Trump is trying to do.
Yeah.
And the firing of CIA agents, the cleaning out of the FBI, turning the FBI into a bunch of gumshoes tracking criminals rather than a politicized, weaponized police force. That's what he's trying to do, a lot of things at once. And sometimes it doesn't quite fit together. And I don't think that he's the total genius that some people think, that he can figure it all out. But the weakness, I think, of his strategy is economics. I don't know. What do you think, Alex?
I think that economics is definitely the Achilles heel for Trump. And I think that he can be attacked in this way, and he can be, how do you call it? He can be blamed for an economic crisis. But, you know, I don't know how it is exactly right now, but, you know, as I discussed this with somebody about the Russian central bank, because they said, this was a while ago, but they said, well, did you know that the Rothschilds still control the Russian central bank? And I said, no, they don't. Well, but they're the share, you know, the controlling shareholder. I said, it doesn't matter. You know, what matters is who has the monopoly on breaking legs and kidnapping your kids. That's what matters. So, you know, if Nabiulina would go by the book and say, oh, well, you know, Mr. Jacob Rothschild said, I have to do this, then I have to do this. Well, you know, she'll get a call from Vladimir Putin, who will tell you, no, you're not going to be doing this. You're going to be doing something else, because ultimately, you know, Jacob Rothschild might own shares, but Vladimir Putin owns the prisons and the investigators and the prosecutors and so forth. So you're going to have to, you know, you're going to have to fall into line. It doesn't matter who owns the place. And so right now in the United States, I see that the support for the Democrats has cratered to such an extent that practically hardcore Democratic supporters are now, if they're not outright cheering what Trump and Elon Musk and RFK are doing, they're almost gloating, and they're saying, you guys are so pathetic that even in the face of this, you're making such a poor showing, and you're only destroying your reputations even further. You know, when they came out all protesting against USAID, even though it's very, very obvious to everybody's dogs and cats that this was the motherlode of corruption in the system. So everybody should say, like, well, good, you know, that's a good way to drain the swamp. Instead, you know, you have Bernie Sanders and people saying, like, oh, this is the, you know, the worst of us attacking the best of us.
Yeah.
Except nobody believes him anymore. Anyway, you know, so going back to the central bank, I think a lot will depend about the relationship between the administration and the central bank. You know, is Jay Powell on board with Trump and his reforms, or is he going to try to sabotage Trump and his reforms? And does Trump have a way to twist Jerome Powell's arms in case he doesn't cooperate? And I wouldn't be surprised if Trump did have a way to twist his arms, because I think that there's a lot of people who are now allies with Trump, who are in the in the law enforcement, in the intelligence apparatus. They have because the previous administrations have gone so overboard with collecting the data and storing everybody's conversations and emails, and that now if Kash Patel goes into FBI, he's going to be sitting on a mountain of data, and I don't think that those systems really discriminate who's one of our guys, who's one of their guys, and then they're going to have means at their disposal.
Alex, one of those issues could easily become BlackRock.
Yes.
Larry Fink thinks he's able to walk between the two camps, that he's able to loot Ukraine and still be somehow acceptable to Trump. There's a real vulnerability for BlackRock in the German election. I don't know if people know this, but Friedrich Merz, who's supposedly the leading candidate for the Christian Democrats, spent 6 years as the chairman of BlackRock Germany. And this is becoming a big issue in the campaign now. Because what is Merz doing? Merz wants to continue the war in Ukraine. He wants to provide the Taurus missiles. He wants to be at war with Russia. And even for some of the psychotics in the current government, this is going too far. The collapsed government, the Schultz government.
But it's not only that. It's that they understand that it's BlackRock who is heavily invested in Ukraine, and who are now watching their investments be taken by the Russians.
Yeah.
And so obviously, if Friedrich Merz wants to send every last German to fight against Russia, it's not for principles, it's not for freedom and democracy, it's for those resources and the assets that they invested in. They want to rescue them. So yeah, I do agree with that, and I think that they are. BlackRock is an investment management company. They're not a bank.
Yeah.
They cannot create deposits and issue credit, and so that whole business can stampede away from that really, really fast.
Okay.
And I think your point about Jerome Powell is quite relevant also, because there's an uptick in inflation now in the United States. And this discussion of tariffs will probably lead to more inflation. And Trump knows that he got elected partly because Biden couldn't do a damn thing to stop inflation. In fact, Biden's policies were inflationary. So Trump is going to have to figure that out. And I think that's another reason why what Musk is going to do at a certain point is start looking at the defense budget. Because if you want to find the waste, you can find it in some of the social services and other areas, and the sex life of bees that are studied in various institutions. But what's the big waste? It's $1 trillion or more going into these losing wars, U.S. bases all over the world. And at a certain point, Trump is going to have to take on this military-industrial corporate cartel complex. And part of the problem is that Silicon Valley is heavily invested in that. So the question then becomes, where do Musk's loyalties lie? So it's going to be a very interesting period immediately ahead to see how that's going to be addressed.
Well, one of the things that Trump is doing that's going to reduce inflation potentially is cutting government spending through the elimination of U.S. aid. Now, looking at what's happening with all the corruption in U.S. aid, so we can speak to that. There's was it over $200 million for Soros, millions of dollars for various mainstream media outlets, New York Times, the BBC,
Politico,
Pakistani media outlets as well. I've looked at those, right? No
World Economic Forum.
The world is $68 million for the World Economic Forum. Never mind the complete nonsense expenditure. Because, you mentioned about the sex lives of bees. I think it was the sex lives of trans bees. That's what that's about, right?
Can trans bees be allowed to participate in bee sports?
That's right.
Had I only known all this before, I would not have been writing about geopolitics. I'd be writing about trans bees.
And getting paid for it. Because you write well, Alex, right? So, and then he's taken on the other NGOs, including Red Cross, and how that's been involved in illegal, in the movement of illegal immigrants into the US and perhaps elsewhere and everything. And everywhere, people are creaming a little bit off wherever they can. It all piles up. And then something I saw just before I came on, which I was really pleased about. One of the charities that the USAID was providing money for is one of the charities that brings illegal immigrants into Ireland. And they're now not going to have the money to continue the destruction of that country. Thank bloody goodness. So, any comments about that?
Well, I just, where this could also go, and I think it's going to go, is at the question of the role of the British in shaping U.S. intelligence. This is a very important issue. That Trump played hardball with the British by initially denying the acceptance of Peter Mandelson as the ambassador to the United States. Mandelson is one of the top people from the Blair period, and he was going to be the Trump whisperer, and they had to back away from that. You also have Jonathan Powell, who's the chief of staff of Starmer, who came from Blair. You have this corrupt crowd that's screwing up everything, even worse than the Tories. But they still have a base in the U.S. intelligence community through the special relationship. And so what was the argument that was covered in the U.S. media about why Tulsi Gabbard shouldn't be director of national intelligence? Now, I'm not saying Tulsi Gabbard is the greatest person of all time, but on Syria, she went after the British role through the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights in the lying about chemical weapons usage supposedly by the Assad regime. She knows Vanessa Beeley. She's very close with these networks that know that the British and the Americans who were connected to the British were supporting jihadists. And I think this, when you mentioned before the Kennedy assassination papers, there's so many scandals in U.S. intelligence. The whole Russiagate story, which began with Hannigan and GCHQ, Sir Richard Dearloffe and the weapons of mass destruction. There's so much there to dig into. And the question then is, where are the honest American analysts? And I'll tell you where you find a lot of them. They're talking to Judge Napolitano. People like Ray McGovern and McGregor and even Jeffrey Sachs. You have people who are clearly honed in on the fraud of the special relationship controlling the United States. And this also gets at the role of the Mossad, because the Mossad is, I would say, an eastern branch of British intelligence, a crucial branch.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is, I think, thank you to both of you and also to Tom and Richard Poe. I'm really clear, and I can see it is the British, that's the British Empire, the remnants of the British Empire, that's the head of the snake. So then how do you see the impact of what Trump is doing in the US, rolling out, in particular with Keir Starmer's regime?
Alex, you want
to? Yeah, I would like to. Only I would have to ask Rich to repeat the question, please.
Alex, would you like this at school?
I was taking a note of what Harley just said while you were asking the question, and then I missed.
Alex, I bet at school you were far too studious for your own good. All right. So I said I'm clear that the head of the snake is the British, thanks to you and Tom and Harley and Richard Poe. And I can see it, that the British are out to rule the world through their various proxies, just like they ruled India through various proxies. It's the same game. But how do you see, my question is, how do you see what Trump is doing in the United States, cleaning up all the corruption, pulling back, drawing the gold out of London? How do you see that's going to impact Keir Starmer's regime?
Well, I think it's already impacting his regime very adversely. So just yesterday, the Bank of England cut the interest rate by 0.25%. Now, this sounds like a little nothing event that shouldn't even make a blip on anybody's radar, but actually it's kind of a big deal because the Bank of England has a inflation target of 2%. That's their inflation target. So they're fighting inflation right now. They're fighting to bring inflation down, and the inflation rate, according to December data, is 2.5%. So it means that the official inflation rate, which is still higher than the real inflation rate, is still 0.5% higher than the target. And that means that they should be tightening, not loosening their monetary policy. They should be hiking the interest rate, not cutting them. But they cut today. And out of the 9 members of the Monetary Policy Council Committee, 7 voted for the cut, and 2 of them voted for a 0.5% cut, or for a bigger cut. And these 2 are known to be inflation hawks. So what did they see that spooked them into making this U-turn on fighting inflation and cut? Well, apparently the labor market in the UK is catastrophic. It's unraveling in much faster way than even pessimists expected. So I guess that the Bank of England judged that stimulating the economy at this moment is more important than fighting inflation. So it's, they blinked. That's what it called. They stared down the markets and they blinked. And so that reveals that the British economy is in really dire straits. And they are, a nation, like any person or any company, always try to appear as creditworthy as possible, and to make these concessions, to admit this to the market is a very, very bad thing. And then, yesterday they had the press conference, and Andrew Bailey, the governor of the Bank of England, tried to put a brave face on it. It said like, well, the disinflationary trends are now in place, but they take a long time. So that's all going to be really fine. So don't worry about any of that. We're just going to be cutting a little bit. No, no big deal. Nothing to see here. Disperse. And then there was a question during the press conference where one of the journalists asked, well, what's the deal with the gold risk, with the gold? How do you call it? Delivering the gold that people wish to withdraw from the vaults of the Bank of England. And then this deputy governor, Dave, forget his last name, he launched into this word salad, which I don't think it helped at all. I think it only made it worse. He said, we have 400,000 gold bars, and since the beginning of the year, 2% were withdrawn. But he didn't say how many were withdrawn from October 2024, because it was practically from Donald Trump's election that gold started being withdrawn in large quantities from not just from the Bank of England vault, but generally started to be repatriated into the United States. But a lot of it is for sure coming from the UK. And so instead of making those deliveries within a few days, now it takes between 4 and 8 weeks if you want to take your gold out from the Bank of England's vault. So there's obviously nobody's going to tell you the truth, but people in the markets are saying something ain't right. And the suspicion is that the bullion banks with the LBMA have completely run out of bullion, and so they're putting pressure on the Bank of England to lend them the Bank of England's gold. This is what this is in the old-fashioned terms. These are the beginnings of a run on a bank.
Yeah.
This is gathering now. And I think that, Trump is not going to help, I don't think, or he's going to help at an exorbitant price, which I don't know what it is. It's not going to be a money price. It's going to be a different kind of price. But Donald Trump, I think, fully understands where Russiagate came from. Donald Trump, I think, understands who exerted pressure on him in 2019 to launch an attack on Iran. That came from the British embassy. And the affair got so ugly that the Brits had to recall their ambassador to Washington, Sir Kim Darroch.
Darroch, yeah.
And the recrimination, the insults were going from Kim Darroch at Donald Trump. So I think that Donald Trump probably knows how dirty the Brits have been playing and how much damage they have done to him and to his administration the last time around. And I think that you would have to be very simple-minded not to put the two and two together, and to understand that that's the Mordor. The city of London is the epicenter of this whole rotten system that we have in the West.
That's why there's such hostility toward the Kash Patel nomination, because Patel, from his position.
Sorry, before we go there, and we will, Alex, I just want to ask you about the inflation thing. Isn't what, and if you can just keep a short answer, then we can go to Hardy. Isn't this what Keir Starlin wants? Because all the policies the government are putting in place are designed to make us poorer, hungrier, die sooner. They're not doing anything to encourage business or the economy.
Well, the inflation, when you have more debts than you can pay, inflation is the easiest way of defaulting. Because if you defaulted flat out and you said, well, guess what? All these debts, I'm no longer servicing them anymore. Like Zelensky did on 31 July last year. You risk plunging the economy all at once into a depression and a deep financial crisis, bank collapses, and so forth. So what you do instead is you backstop all the bad debts in the system by printing money, flooding the system with liquidity, and allowing all these zombie banks and corporations to continue servicing their debts.
Yeah.
And that ultimately, in the end, creates inflation. But nobody notices, because they'll tell you, oh, it's the hedge fund managers, oh, it's the merchants, it's the greedy shop owners who are raising the prices. And for people, it's very, very difficult to understand what is the ultimate cause of inflation. So they will get angry at the hedge fund managers, and they will get angry at the supermarket chains, and they'll get angry at mom and pop stores. They'll get angry at everybody where they actually come into direct contact with the rising cost of living. With the gas companies, with the oil companies, and the Bank of England will say, well, there's nothing to do with us. You have a bad government. You elected a bad government. It's your own damn fault.
Got it. Thank you, Alex. Thank you. Harley,
before we go to Patel, I just one thing on that. What Alex is just describing is a fundamental disconnect between the idea of solvency and liquidity. Because the way the central banks operate is that monetary policy is the key thing. And if you have debts that can't be paid, there's a process called bankruptcy reorganization. But if you do that, you risk triggering a unending series of defaults that blow out the system. So it's easier for them to provide liquidity. And instead of recognizing that the system as a whole has become increasingly insolvent because of the move away from physical economic production to speculation. And I think that's one of the key factors that the British understand. And this is where you have the Keynesian policy. And then, of course, the other side of it is the Austrian school, which is to go ahead and create the depression. And there was a different method, which was the American system of credit production to direct to physical economic development, and at the same time, bankruptcy reorganization. Now, what does this have to do with Russiagate? Well, this is the whole essence of the modern problem after 50 years of the post-1971 disconnect, the end of the Bretton Woods system, removing the gold reserve basis of the dollar. It turned the world over to the speculators like the Soroses and the various the hedge funds, and they were just doing what they could do to make money. And if the idea is who has the biggest profit is the winner, then no one is concerned about the amount of debt that's being built up in the background. But at a certain point, that debt starts to hit, and that's what's happening now. And so what you're seeing is the developing sector, the so-called global south, is saying, we're not going to play this game anymore. We're not going to be looted so you can maintain your solvency. That's what the BRICS are all about. And the I've argued, and we at the LaRouche movement have argued, that the whole purpose of using Ukraine against Russia was to attack the potential of the BRICS. Same reason they're attacking China and saying that we have to deal with China and Taiwan. And same thing with Iran and the situation in Southwest Asia. So they're trying to prevent the emergence of a monetary system which is based on physical production rather than speculation. And I think that's the crucial point here that people have to understand.
Yep, Harley, thank you. And I know it's something that Alex talks a lot about, the importance of collateral. Okay, now over to Kash Patel, his nomination, and why it's so important.
Well, the Democrats are pushing it back because they know Patel has the list. He wrote a book where he has a list of 60 names of people who committed crimes, whether it was with the FISA court, whether it was the FBI and the investigation of Trump and his allies, the lies around the Biden laptop, the Hunter Biden laptop. One case after another where you see the intelligence community spreading lies for the purposes of destroying a presidency and getting away with it because the media cartel was connected to the people who were spreading the lies. Now, what if you start unraveling that? And I think the importance of declassifying the Kennedy files should not be overlooked, because this is something Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been insisting on. Why? Because he knows that behind this, you're going to find the CIA and the cartels that benefit from the CIA policy. And he's going to push it. Patel's going to push it because Patel was a loyalist to Trump. And when he served on Devin Nunes' committee, the House Investigative Committee, he actually pieced together all the corruption of Russiagate. So the Democrats are terrified. And so what do they say? They say Patel is a kook. Tulsi Gabbard is a puppet. She's a puppet of Putin. She's a puppet of Assad. She's a puppet of conspiracy theorists.
Puppet of Assad. That's really funny. Who's Assad?
Yeah, well,
how would that?
When she told the truth about the U.S. The CIA training and recruiting the
yes,
ISIS.
I know, I'm aware of that, but that would be irrelevant now because Assad is not in power anymore. So,
but the media is filled with stories about what a brutal dictator he was.
Oh yes, that's true.
And they forget that who was he fighting? He was fighting the terrorists that the United States was backing, as Michael Flynn exposed. So you have a whole fabric, a cover story, which is being shattered, which is being ripped to shreds.
Yes.
And this is life and death for people like Pelosi and Schumer.
Yes, and I think that these are exactly the reasons why even the Democrats can't stomach this anymore. And they're, I'm watching them, and if they're not outright cheering for Trump and everything that's going on, they're piling on these, Pelosi's and all these, how do you call, DNC people. Yeah. Because they're only digging the hole for themselves deeper and deeper.
Like Dick Durbin, the senator, refusing, I think chair of one of the committees, refusing to release the Epstein list. Yeah. And everybody's wondering, like, why wouldn't you want to release it? Because you're on the list.
Well, and remember, the FBI was the center of sexual blackmail of congressmen for years. That was Hoover's great calling card. He knew who was doing what to whom. And they still do that. Yeah. They still have that as an element of control. The Epstein list is an example. So what if you rip the cover off that and you show people that the corruption, it's not just that they're stupid and they're bad policies, it's that they're benefiting from those bad policies. They're protected. Their lifestyle is protected. So I think that's why Patel is seen as such a threat. And earlier they did everything they could to keep Matt Gaetz out. Gaetz was less sophisticated than Patel, but the same tendency, the desire to defend Trump from these people who are hiding something.
So what's going to happen now with Patel's confirmation? Is it going to open Senate or something, an open vote?
Well, no, it still has to get through the committee. I mean, what happened with Gabbard is really interesting because there were 3 Republicans on the committee. I think there was one more Republican than Democrats. And if all the Republicans voted in unity, she would get confirmed in the committee. But if one of them turned against her, they might not be able to confirm her. And there was a real fight to get 3 Republicans to stick with Gabbard. And the Susan Collins, who always votes with the Democrats, at the last minute switched to support Gabbard. So Gabbard got through the committee. Patel has the same thing in the Senate Intelligence Committee, or Criminal Justice Committee, I guess, where the Republicans have one more vote than the Democrats, but the Democrats are tying it up and stalling it, trying to find something they can use to sabotage him. Now, Gabbard and Robert Kennedy's nominations are now going to the full Senate next week. Patel is still held up. But if he gets through the committee process, then the Republican majority will probably hold, and you'll have a new FBI director who is not controlled by the organized crime elements of the banking system and the commercial cartels. So it can be a whole new era in the United States.
Wow. But some of those Republican senators will have been compromised.
Of
They
course.
don't want to be on the Epstein list. Why are they going to vote for their own execution?
Well, maybe that's where they're having talks with Donald Trump. Remember, Trump plays hardball, and maybe he's saying to them, well, maybe we'll lose your file.
Maybe. Alex, anything for you?
Well, not on this directly, but I wanted to, because we mentioned before the rule of, ideology, and then you mentioned idiocy, and then we talked about what's his name, the ambassador for
Peter Mandelson.
Peter Mandelson, yeah. So Peter Mandelson strikes me as a particularly sinister character. He was friends. He was close with Jeffrey Epstein. He was also close with Jacob Rothschild, and he seems to be always in the right place at the wrong time. He seems to be at the center of involvement with some of these very important affairs going on.
If I remember correctly, I think Spitting Image, the puppet for Peter Mandelson, was a vampirish character.
He was called the Prince of Darkness.
Prince of Darkness, that was it.
Okay, yeah, there you go.
That fits.
Yeah, okay, so related to that, because obviously, we know bits and pieces, but we don't know a whole lot, right? Because a lot of all of this is happening in the darkness. But I just watched today or yesterday one of the episodes of Candace Owens about Emmanuel Macron and his quote unquote wife, where she was going to, I don't know what the point is, to prove that she's not a woman, that she's a man, or something like this. And I have to say, I was only moderately interested, because this is one of those things where either it's true or it's not true. I'll find out, when everybody gives in their verdict and everybody knows, then I'll know, and I don't need to be the first one to know. I'm not interested. But somehow I found myself watching one of these episodes that Candace Owens posted, and it was really well done. So I watched the whole 40 minutes of it, and I was absolutely shocked by how rotten the system is. I mean, I knew that the system was rotten, but the extent to which it's rotten, and the extent to which a lot, if not all of these people at the very apex of power are moral degenerates and sexual deviants is astonishing. It's just like one thing after another, where in the end you get the impression that there's no way to even reach these levels of power unless you are one of these people and unless you're with them. And I was told this by a person who kind of knew one of these people. And she was a friend with one of these very wealthy French semi-aristocrats who told her the story that basically, there's a hierarchy there, and that, if you want to be one of the favored persons in the hierarchy, you kind of have to submit yourself to the person who is above you in the hierarchy, and that usually involves sexual intercourse, and I mean, ugly kind of stuff. And so I think that it seems to me that this is the standard system of governance in the West, and then this is how we get all these incomprehensible policies otherwise, that you have to have LGBT ideology in your society. You have to have gay Pride Month. You have to have these parades everywhere. You have to have these transgender storybooks and stuff like that. It has to be shoved down your children's throat in the school. I have a friend who is Russian, whose daughter goes to school in the UK, and who once at the age of 12 came home and she said, like, oh, I think I'm a lesbian. And then it turns out that they practically convinced her in school that she was, so you're actually, it's like pouring acid into the structure of society, into families. And so I think that I think the Donald Trump administration isn't part of this, that it's a complete break with this. And so I think that what's going to come out with Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard, and all these people conducting investigations is a whole lot of ugly. A whole lot of these people are extremely compromised. And I think that the Trump administration is going to take advantage of this. You make a deal, as Harley suggested, hey, well, maybe we can lose your file, but you need to rat off on these other people. So I think that the 4 years that are ahead of us could turn out to be a lot more interesting than we know yet.
Yeah, indeed. And it isn't even like Trump needs to offer the deal. Some of them will come forward and say, listen, I'm willing to talk. We've got to work something out. They'll be
because they want to make sure that they're the first ones, that somebody else doesn't get the deal before and pushes them under the bus.
Yeah.
But then this is because the Élysée Palace has gone out of their way to try to stop Candace Owens from broadcasting this report, and she's going on. She's persisting, and I think that is actually going to impact the relations between the United States and France.
It's that level of personal courage which is needed.
Exactly.
I can tell you from my experience with the LaRouche movement over 50 years, we were treated quite brutally by that establishment. Before there was the Get Trump Task Force, there was the Get LaRouche Task Force. And we know it from the inside in a certain way, and we've been fighting for it. And we're seeing the potential now, the light at the end of the tunnel, you might say. And there's got to be more impatience to get to the end of the tunnel. But it's going to take more people to have the courage to do it.
Yeah, I know about that, Harley, because I think that when I was a student in university, I came across Lyndon LaRouche. I don't remember if it was late 80s or early 90s. And something about what I read made a lot of sense to me. But then almost immediately I came, oh no, these are far-right, fascists. They're very dangerous, radical, blah, blah, blah. And so I thought, oh, thank you for warning me. And then because back then I thought that if it's in the news, it must be true, right?
Well, that must have been the late 80s, because in the early 80s, we were called communists, KGB agents, East German Stasi deployment. And so on.
Okay. Must have been late.
It took a while for them to get their message straight.
Okay. But then I think that maybe some 15, 20 years ago, I was randomly came across Executive Intelligence Review, the publication that you publish.
Yeah.
And I read a number of articles. I thought, like, wow, this publication is excellent. What is this? And then I looked and I was like, LaRouche. Isn't that those nasty people from the Nazis, the fascists? Well, and then, but by this time I knew that the media lied. And I felt like, well, they did a number of them, but all of this stuff makes total sense, and it's excellent quality, reading. And one of the moments, and I think this was kind of 2014 or something like this, I came across an article that was talking about these multipolar integrations and all these trade routes that could be developed going from west to east and east to west and from north to south and crisscross the whole of Eurasian continent and Africa, and then also across with the United States, and how this would be, a different world of prosperity. And the whole thing made complete and total sense to me. And I remember thinking very clearly, yeah, unfortunately, this will never happen. This is just complete fantasy, because they will never allow for this to happen. And
But maybe.
and look where we are now. A lot of that is actually happening.
Well, remember, it was in 2013 that Xi Jinping first started talking about the Belt and Road.
Belt and Road Initiative, yeah.
And 15 years before that, we put out a major report on the Eurasian land bridge. And this became, I mean, Helga Zepp-LaRouche is known in China as the Silk Road lady for her advocacy of this kind of policy.
Yes, yes.
And this is where we have to win Trump to recognize that it's not a question of adversarial competition with China. The Chinese are willing to be inclusive. They'd like to have the United States work with them on the Belt and Road Initiative. And so that's, it's still in a sense a dream, but it's got to become a reality quickly.
Yep, which means breaking down the existing structures. I want to go back, Alex, to what you said about the degeneracy. And this is it's not a serious invitation. You should come out and follow me, Alex. I'm doing my job as a child protection social worker. You want to see degeneracy. And what we have is that sort of degeneracy that I deal with on a household level at a national and international level. And I recently interviewed Lieutenant Colonel Stephen, I've just forgotten his name. Steve Murray. That's it. Apologies, Steve. Right? Steve Murray. And we did a show about child trafficking. And, when you have a pedophile president like Joe Biden, then you have policies in place that promote that sort of activity, that make it easier. Plus, by sexualizing children, well, they become disturbed adults that are easy to control, that aren't going to form any sort of resistance. The last thing any ruling class wants is a coherent, intelligent, stable, strong populace. So you sexualize them, they don't know where the men don't know whether they're girls or not, right? And vice versa. They're easy to rule over. Plus, then you've got more fodder, for the pedophile to prey upon. And it's a great way of controlling people. But it is getting exposed when my wonderful, beautiful wife, who's not into politics like I am, sends me a little Instagram clip, which is about Keir Starmer's relationship with Jimmy Savile when Keir Starmer was when he was a boy. So it's filtering out, and then I think it's getting exposed that when corrupt people encounter people of integrity like Jeremy Corbyn and Trump, both flawed human beings, then boy, do they get laid into by those that could be compromised by men and women of integrity. So it's all coming out. Any last words, gentlemen?
We got to keep it coming.
For this particular podcast.
Yeah, for this, but no, not for your life, Alex. When you back on in a week's time, and then in a month's time, and stuff on a regular basis, and for you to, for your kids and everything in your family.
No, because it was good. If it were going to be my last words, it would be a bit heavier. So I just want to be sure that
we don't have time for that, and we're not there yet, Alex. Okay.
We just have to keep the fight going.
Yes.
And the one thing that they count on is people getting tired and giving up. And that was what was going on in the middle of the Biden administration. There was a submission, and Trump kept fighting. And, I'll always remember what LaRouche once said. He said, "I'll never be defeated because I'm never going to quit." And I think that's the way we have to approach this.
Yeah.
I would second what Harley said, and I would remind everyone that this is down to the people. It's the people who put Donald Trump where he is now. The same pressure, the same determination, the same drive that swept Donald Trump into the White House, even though the most powerful people in the world definitely didn't want him there, is the same kind of pressure that will keep Trump on the right track. So, that's as opposed to us sitting back now and saying like, okay, so now he's in the White House, what's he going to do for us now? No, we have to keep engaged, we have to keep informed, we have to keep interacting, and we have to keep demanding the kinds of reforms that we want and changing the world into something that we want our children to actually grow in, and their children and all future generations. So we have to understand, among other things, who we are. Because, if you lived if you live for multiple generations in one kind of a matrix, you don't necessarily know who you are. You only know who you are in that matrix. And as we gain greater freedom, we're going to understand more about ourselves, and we have to understand what we actually want, and then we have to demand those things, because so far it's always been about economic growth and full employment. Pretty much, that's that. And then how do you do that? Well, you increase the interest rates or you decrease the interest rates, and you vote for the left guys or you vote for the right guys, right? That was about it. I think it's a lot more rich and varied than that, and we have to kind of go back to the drawing board and start thinking that. We have to start thinking about things that make us happy, about things that seem to have meaning rather than, pursuing meaningless things. New ways of making a living, new ways of interacting with other people, prioritizing time with people, prioritizing family, and things like that. Anyway, that's all I had to say about that.
Thank you. And that also includes expressing gratitude. So I'm grateful to you both for taking the time out for this conversation. It's been a fabulous conversation. I'll have the links to where people can find you and follow your work in the description below. And I had a conversation with Tony Benn once.
Tony Benn,
yeah. I have a picture of me standing next to Tony Benn and him holding my son when my son was about 2 years old. And I met him at Euston Station. We were on our way to an anti-war rally in Manchester. And I said, "Can I have a picture of you holding my son?" And my son's a big Tony Benn fan now, right? But it was an anti-war rally. And I spoke up and I asked Tony Benn a question. I said, "Look, I'm so angry what the government is doing by sending British men to go fight this war in Iraq and spending our money for that. It's a pointless war." And he said to me, "Your anger is merited, but you have to match it with patience." How long was Mandela in prison? I said, 27 years. He goes, "The fight goes on." So thank you both, and hugs to you both. And please share, subscribe, spread the word. And between now and when I see you next, fill your hearts with gratitude and freedom. Alex, Harley, Rich, all the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.